JUJU Watkins is currently going viral for saying some things about Caitlin Clark.
JUJU Watkins just shook the entire basketball world with her latest comments about Caitlin Clark, and fans are losing it. What started as a casual interview quickly spiraled into a social media firestorm after people accused JUJU of subtly throwing shade at Caitlin, claiming she gets special treatment from both referees and the media. Still recovering from a major injury and already under heavy scrutiny, JUJU didn't hold back. She openly talked about how some players get officiated differently, portrayed differently, and even celebrated differently, and that's where things got heated. Some fans are calling it pure jealousy, while others believe she finally said what so many athletes have been too scared to admit. Regardless, her comments have completely reignited the debate over favoritism in women's basketball. So is JUJU simply frustrated with the double standards she's witnessing, or is she boldly calling out a system that's turned Caitlin Clark into the sport's golden child? The answer might run deeper than anyone thinks, because before all this controversy, JUJU Watkins was already one of college basketball's biggest stars, known for her confidence, electrifying scoring ability, and poise far beyond her years.
That is JUJU Watkins, man, and I had the honor of seeing her play in person. I had the honor of meeting her mother, and I'm telling you right now, she's next up, bro. There's no doubt in my mind that JUJU Watkins is going to come into the W standing on all business, breaking all records. That's how I feel.
She wasn't just playing the game, she was shaping a legacy. Fans saw JUJU Watkins as the next big thing, the future face of women's basketball, and possibly the only player capable of matching Caitlin Clark's star power. Every time she hit the floor, JUJU carried more than just her team's hopes. She carried the weight of an entire generation searching for its next icon. But that incredible rise came to a heartbreaking pause when she tore her ACL late in the 2024 season, abruptly cutting short the momentum that had made her one of the most electrifying players in college hoops.
We got some unfortunate news. JUJU Watkins possibly will miss the entire 2025 to 26 basketball season. And this unfortunate situation, man. We ultimately know what happened to her last year. She tore her ACL, playing in a matchup to damn near go to the national championship.
The injury was a crushing blow, not just for JUJU Watkins and her team, but for the entire sport. Just when she was hitting her stride, everything came to a sudden stop. Overnight, the player everyone expected to dominate the next season was stuck on the sidelines, forced to watch as others stepped into the spotlight. Meanwhile, the WNBA buzz was all about Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and A'ja Wilson, and JUJU's name slowly drifted out of the headlines. But make no mistake, her star power never really faded. With major endorsement deals from brands like Nike and representation by Rich Paul's Clutch Sports, JUJU stayed relevant even while rehabbing. She kept showing up in ads, doing interviews, and staying connected with fans online, proving that even off the court, her presence was impossible to ignore.
Now, that is not stopping her from landing big-time shoe deals like Nike. That is not stopping her from her agent, Clutch Sports, who I still believe Caitlin Clark should have went to. Rich Paul keeping her name alive, and as of right now, to me, JUJU Watkins is still going to be the biggest star in college basketball without actually picking up a bat.
JUJU Watkins' personality, cool, confident, and just a bit rebellious, instantly connected with fans who loved her unapologetic energy. She never sugarcoated her thoughts, and that boldness made her both admired and controversial at the same time. But behind the scenes, frustration was quietly building. After putting in endless hours to get back into top form, JUJU couldn't help but notice how every conversation in women's basketball seemed to circle back to one name, Caitlin Clark. Every broadcast, every highlight, every headline, it all revolved around her. And while JUJU knew it wasn't Caitlin's fault, the constant comparisons were impossible to ignore. She was well aware of her own elite talent, yet she could see how differently the spotlight shined. Fans saw it too. Some questioned why JUJU wasn't getting the same level of recognition, while others insisted Caitlin had simply earned her crown.
Accuracy, probably Caitlin. Handles, Chelsea. Trained, reading range, Caitlin.
When JUJU Watkins sat down for her recent Sports Illustrated interview, she spoke with honesty, not out of spite, but from years of watching an uneven playing field. She gave Caitlin Clark full credit for her shooting, poise, and basketball IQ, but also pointed out that some players seem to get a little extra love. both from referees and the media. It was a small, offhand comment, easy to overlook in context, but once social media got a hold of it, everything blew up. Within hours, clips were all over Twitter and TikTok with titles like "JUJU Watkins calls out Caitlin Clark" and "Jealousy or Truth." Fans instantly took sides. What started as a calm, thoughtful interview turned into the biggest talking point in women's basketball. And just like that, JUJU, who had quietly been rehabbing for months, was back in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. The viral moment came from what should have been a harmless conversation. JUJU had been composed, open, and reflective, talking about her recovery, her mindset, and the player she admired. When asked who inspired her most, she named A'ja Wilson for her dominance, Chelsea Gray for her toughness, and Caitlin Clark for her skill and clutch performances. It was a respectful, balanced answer, but one small line where she mentioned that some players get calls others don't, and that the media tends to favor certain stars, changed everything. The internet clipped that single moment, stripped it of context, and the wildfire began. Suddenly, people were claiming JUJU had taken a shot at Caitlin. Hashtags like "Check JUJU vs Caitlin" and "No Special Treatment" started trending. Even though JUJU never said a negative word about Caitlin, the narrative had already been written. The injured star calling out the league's golden child. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Some fans applauded JUJU for speaking the truth about favoritism in women's basketball, while others accused her of jealousy and playing the victim. For every person praising her courage, another labeled her bitter. Overnight, her thoughtful remarks were twisted into controversy. Those who actually watched the full interview saw a humble, intelligent young woman giving credit to her peers and honestly sharing her perspective. But social media doesn't thrive on honesty. It thrives on chaos. Sports pages, podcasts, and reaction channels picked apart every word, tone, and expression. Meanwhile, JUJU stayed silent. No tweets, no statements, nothing. Her team at Clutch Sports reportedly advised her to ignore the noise and let it pass. Still, the debate only grew louder. Even WNBA players began chiming in. Some quietly agreed with JUJU's point about favoritism, while others defended Caitlin's hard-earned spotlight. What started as a simple interview evolved into something much bigger, a reflection of how women's basketball handles fame, fairness, and perception. By the end of the week, what began as a respectful conversation about admiration had been twisted into a headline about envy. JUJU Watkins never meant to spark a war, but with just a few honest words, she touched one of the most sensitive nerves in the game, whether some players are protected while others have to fight just to be seen. To understand why her comments hit so hard, you have to understand something bigger: the Caitlin Clark effect. Because Caitlin Clark isn't just another superstar. She's the face of a movement that completely reshaped women's basketball. From her record-shattering college run to her headline-grabbing WNBA debut, she's brought a level of attention, ticket sales, and TV ratings the league has never experienced before. Every game she plays turns into a spectacle. Every highlight becomes viral. Her impact goes far beyond the court. She's a media darling, a marketing powerhouse, and the symbol of what the future of women's sports could look like. But that spotlight comes with tension. Many fans and players have quietly wondered how much of Caitlin's treatment comes from her talent and how much from how she's portrayed. Her rise has created a new kind of pressure for everyone else. Suddenly, every comparison, every headline, every debate in women's basketball seems to circle back to her name. Players like Angel Reese, Paige Bueckers, and JUJU Watkins are constantly measured against her. And even the smallest comment about Caitlin, good or bad, turns into instant clickbait. That's the world JUJU walked into. She never disrespected Caitlin. She praised her game, her leadership, and her competitive fire. But when JUJU mentioned that some players get more leeway with officials or more love from the media, people immediately linked those words to Clark, and context didn't matter. The internet wanted a villain, and JUJU became the target. But here's the truth: the Caitlin Clark effect isn't just about fame or attention. It's about how success can shift the entire balance of a sport. Caitlin's presence has brought money, sponsorships, and mainstream exposure that women's basketball desperately needed. Yet it's also created quiet frustration among players who feel the league's marketing machine promotes one type of image while sidelining others. Some athletes, especially black players, have even hinted that race and personality shape who gets celebrated and who gets criticized. It's a conversation that's always existed behind the scenes, but JUJU's comments pushed it right into the spotlight. spotlight. Fans see it too. They've noticed how Caitlyn's physical style of play earns her whistles that others don't get. It's not that she asks for special treatment, it's that the system itself bends to her influence. That's the unspoken truth JUJU was pointing to. She wasn't blaming Caitlyn personally, she was calling out the culture that protects certain stars while leaving others overlooked or over-penalized. In many ways, JUJU didn't create the divide. She just had the courage, or maybe the bad luck, to say out loud what so many have been thinking. And once her words hit social media, the internet did what it always does. It took a simple observation and turned it into an all-out war. Within hours, the internet went wild. Sports blogs, fan pages, and YouTube channels flooded timelines with reaction videos and clickbait titles like JUJU Watkins jealous of Caitlyn Clark, and Caitlyn shuts down the haters again. But at that point, it didn't matter what JUJU had actually said, because once the short clips hit social media, her tone, intent, and even facial expressions were being picked apart like courtroom evidence. X, formerly Twitter, became the main battlefield. Edited snippets of JUJU's interview filled everyone's feed, cropped and exaggerated to make her look like she directly called out Caitlyn by name, even though she hadn't. Comment sections exploded with thousands of replies. Some called her bitter, others praised her for keeping it real. Hashtags like Tars Team Caitlyn and Stand with JUJU started trending at the same time, turning the situation into a digital tug of war. Then TikTok made it even bigger. Fan edits and influencer reactions pulled millions of views overnight. One viral clip paired JUJU's comments with footage of Caitlyn draining threes, captioned "Jealousy never wins." Another stitched JUJU's words next to Angel Reese's viral moments, sparking conversations about race and visibility in women's sports. What started as a basketball discussion had turned into a full-on cultural flashpoint. Mainstream sports media jumped in too. Debate shows and podcasts couldn't resist spinning it into a rivalry for clicks. Analysts argued over whether JUJU was calling out bias or stirring up drama. Some journalists applauded her for holding the media accountable, while others accused her of fueling division just as women's basketball was finally growing in popularity. Former players weighed in as well. Some backed JUJU's point about unfair treatment, while others defended Caitlyn, saying she'd earned every ounce of her spotlight through hard work and consistency. And through all the noise, JUJU said nothing. No statements, no clarifications, nothing. That silence only added fuel to the fire. Fans read it however they wanted. Supporters saw confidence. Critics saw guilt. Her management at Clutch Sports reportedly told her to ride it out and let the internet burn itself out. But the longer she stayed quiet, the louder the storm grew. By the weekend, one small interview had evolved into something much bigger. A conversation about perception, identity, and power in women's basketball. The internet had taken sides, and any sense of nuance was gone. JUJU's original message had been buried beneath the noise. Because beneath all the drama, what JUJU actually said wasn't an attack. It was about fairness. When she mentioned that certain players seemed to get softer criticism, more favorable calls, or endless media attention, she wasn't targeting Caitlyn Clark personally. She was describing a reality many athletes see but rarely speak about. JUJU wasn't angry at Caitlyn. She was frustrated with a system that rewards some players while overlooking others who work just as hard. Her words were never meant to start a feud. They were meant to start a conversation, and that's what's always made JUJU Watkins stand out. She's real, unfiltered, and unwilling to speak in polished PR sound bites. She represents a new generation of athletes, ones confident enough to challenge the narrative instead of just fitting into it. Her message was simple but powerful. Women's basketball still has a long road ahead in how it treats its stars. Caitlyn Clark may have brought millions of new eyes to the game, but the spotlight shouldn't revolve around just one name forever. When fans watched the full interview, they saw a player who respected Caitlyn's talent. JUJU Watkins called her clutch, praised her handles, and gave credit where it was due. There was no jealousy in her tone, only honesty. But once social media got a hold of the clips, that nuance disappeared. The headlines twisted her words into clickbait. JUJU Watkins blames Caitlyn Clark for unfair treatment. The irony? JUJU wasn't pointing fingers. She was calling for balance. Those who know her best describe JUJU as genuine and thoughtful, someone who keeps showing up for her teammates and community even while rehabbing from injury. She's lived what it feels like to be overlooked, to watch the spotlight fade the moment you're sidelined. So when she talks about equal recognition, it's not bitterness, it's experience. But media loves a rivalry. JUJU versus Caitlyn makes for good headlines, even if it misses the bigger truth. These two athletes are fighting for the same thing, respect for women's basketball. JUJU's real point was that the sport's growth should be shared, not monopolized. Behind closed doors, plenty of players reportedly agreed with her. Some even thanked her privately for saying what they couldn't, but few dared to back her publicly, afraid of the backlash. And that's what made JUJU's stance so bold. She didn't play the victim or the villain, she just spoke her truth. Because the real question isn't who gets the loudest applause, it's why one player is expected to carry the entire league when so many others are ready to shine. Just as the online debate was heating up, veteran WNBA guard Kelsey Mitchell stepped in with her own perspective, and it changed everything. On a podcast, she opened up about her experience playing alongside Caitlin Clark in Indiana, giving fans an unfiltered look behind the curtain. Mitchell didn't defend or dismiss anyone. She humanized the conversation. She described Caitlyn as funny, humble, and surprisingly grounded for someone under so much pressure. Her point was clear. Fame looks glamorous, but it's a heavy burden, especially for a young athlete expected to represent an entire sport. She didn't name JUJU directly, but the timing said enough. Mitchell's reflection reminded everyone that while Caitlyn lives under constant attention, that same spotlight also burns. Every word, every play, every misstep becomes a headline. The same media that lifts her up also tears her down. In that way, both JUJU and Caitlyn are fighting different versions of the same battle. One trying to be seen, the other trying to stay sane under the glare. Mitchell also shared how Caitlyn's early season injury forced her to grow up fast, to lead from the bench, to mentor teammates, to stay positive when she couldn't play. That journey mirrored JUJU's recovery from her ACL tear. 2 stars, 2 different paths, but the same lesson: learning patience, resilience, and perspective when the game is taken away. For fans who fueled the rivalry online, Mitchell's words were a wake-up call. Her insight reminded everyone that these women are more than storylines. They're real people navigating fame, pressure, injuries, and expectations, all while inspiring the next generation. When she talked about Caitlyn's humor and humility, it softened the narrative. Mitchell didn't dismiss JUJU's point about favoritism. She just reminded everyone that Caitlyn isn't the enemy. She's another athlete trying to survive in a system that demands perfection. Soon, sports outlets began to shift their tone, highlighting not the rivalry, but the shared struggles and strength that unite these two faces of the game. For the first time since the controversy began, the energy started to shift. Fans who had drawn hard lines began to see the nuance, that JUJU Watkins' frustration and Caitlin Clark's privilege could both exist without animosity. By the end of that week, the online chaos finally began to cool. Much of that was thanks to Kelsey Mitchell's grounded perspective, which built a bridge between two athletes who never wanted to be rivals in the first place. What Mitchell offered was empathy, something rare in the age of social media outrage. And through her words, she reminded everyone that women's basketball doesn't need drama to grow. What it really needs is understanding, respect, and space for more than one superstar to shine. As the noise died down, JUJU Watkins shifted her focus back to what truly mattered: her recovery and her return. After months of grueling rehab from a torn ACL, she was finally cleared for light basketball work. The journey had tested everything: her patience, her confidence, even her sense of identity. For someone who thrived on rhythm, energy, and movement, being forced to slow down was agony. But JUJU turned that pain into fuel. She used the downtime to reflect, rebuild, and refocus. While the internet argued, she was in the gym, sharpening her game, rebuilding her strength, and finding peace in the grind. Those close to her said she had changed. Her workouts became longer, her mindset laser focused. She wasn't chasing clout anymore. She was chasing dominance. When the media asked about Caitlin Clark, JUJU didn't bite. Instead, she talked about growth, discipline, and team goals. It was clear she had turned the page. And as her comeback drew closer, the public began to see her in a new light. The same fans who once called her bitter were now cheering for her redemption. USC's social media began posting clips of JUJU back on the court, and every video went viral. She wasn't just an athlete coming back from injury. She had become a symbol of resilience. Still, the pressure was enormous. Every shot, every move would be analyzed. One bad game, and comparisons to Caitlyn or other stars would resurface instantly. But JUJU didn't run from it. She embraced it. She understood now that criticism was part of greatness. Behind the scenes, her teammates and coaches noticed the transformation. The frustration was gone, replaced by leadership, focus, and quiet confidence. JUJU had grown from a young phenom caught in controversy to a mature player who lifted those around her. The media started to notice too. Headlines began shifting, no longer framing her as the player who threw shade, but as one who showed grace under pressure. Even her critics admitted she handled the storm with poise. Her silence had spoken louder than any public statement ever could, and as her long-awaited return approached, the anticipation was electric. Fans expected fireworks, and JUJU was ready to deliver, but this time, she wasn't playing to silence her doubters. She was playing to remind everyone exactly why she was once called the future of women's basketball. When she finally stepped back onto the hardwood, it felt like a rebirth. A new chapter defined not by rivalry or rumor, but by resilience, redemption, and the hunger to reclaim her crown. And as the dust settled, one truth became clear. The JUJU Watkins-Caitlin Clark saga didn't just expose tension, it revealed the deeper realities shaping women's basketball today. What began as an online firestorm slowly evolved into something much bigger, a reflection on fame, bias, and how media profits from the narratives it creates. Both athletes had become more than just players. They were symbols of two sides of the same revolution. JUJU Watkins represented the new wave, bold, unapologetic, and unafraid to challenge the system. Caitlin Clark embodied the face of polished success, carrying both the privilege and the pressure that come with being the sport's biggest star. Together, their stories exposed the dual reality of a game in transformation, one fueled by star power, sponsorships, and global reach. But in this new era, everything is amplified. Every quote, every facial expression, every emotional moment becomes instant national news. It's a double-edged sword, because while players like JUJU and Caitlin are helping women's basketball soar to new heights, they're also paying the emotional price for that spotlight. They've become household names in a digital age that craves perfection but feeds off controversy. Yet, beneath all the noise, something real and positive began to emerge. Fans who once argued over who was better started realizing both were essential to the sport's rise. Without JUJU's defiance, Caitlin's success might have seemed too effortless. And without Caitlin's reach, JUJU's message about fairness might have been ignored. In a way, they balanced each other, one showcasing the power of stardom, the other the courage to question it. Inside locker rooms and training facilities, the ripple effect was undeniable. Players were no longer just talking about stats and highlights. They were discussing equality, representation, and authenticity in a system that too often values image over integrity. Coaches began emphasizing not only skill and performance, but also mental health, media awareness, and owning your narrative. JUJU's moment became a teaching point that timing and framing can distort even the truest message, but speaking up still matters. Meanwhile, the WNBA and NCAA quietly reaped the rewards of the heightened attention. Ratings climbed, new sponsors signed on, and the so-called Caitlin effect sparked broader conversations about investing in women's sports. What once seemed like a dividing controversy ended up bringing more fans together than it pushed apart. And as JUJU prepared to make her full return, her image had transformed. She wasn't seen as the player who complained. She was seen as the one who dared to challenge the status quo. Caitlin, now deep into her pro career, continued redefining what it means to be a superstar, balancing humility with massive influence. In the end, neither player lost. Both grew, because they didn't just survive the chaos, they became the spark for change. The rivalry that never truly existed gave rise to something far greater, a new era for women's basketball built on respect, honesty, and evolution. JUJU Watkins and Caitlin Clark became two sides of the same story. One about growth, power, and transformation. What started as a wave of controversy ultimately exposed the truth about where the game stands and where it's headed. JUJU's authenticity forced long overdue conversations about favoritism and representation. Caitlin's visibility proved just how far women's basketball has come. Together, they became the twin forces driving a movement bigger than any headline or feud. The noise may fade, but the message stands. Women's basketball deserves respect, equality, and the freedom for every player to shine, without comparison. And as JUJU steps back onto the floor and Caitlin continues her reign at the top, they both carry the promise of a new generation, one where speaking your truth isn't seen as controversy, it's seen as leadership.